What's up, guys? Coach Frost here with Elite MMA. Today, I got to sit down with one of the founders of Elite, Coach Eric Williams. He shares the history of Elite MMA. He's got some great life lessons, some great training tips. I hope you guys enjoy it. Okay, cool. So you just turned 60. You started wrestling when you were 8 years old, 52 years on the mat.
Yeah, yeah. So the 60 thing's weird. Yeah, my one grandfather died in his 40s, the other one in his 50s. So I'm not even supposed to be here. It was my plan. So anyway, yeah. And then you 60. I don't know how time goes. Just all I have to say is I don't know where the time goes. So make sure you choose wisely. Was that Ken Gordon told me one time the only non-renewable natural resource is time. So be careful what you use it for. Something. So anyway, I don't know how we got here, but yes.
So time well spent for you?
Yeah, I'll do some stuff different, but yeah, I think value in your time, and then valuing in the proper ways probably, but yeah, but hey.
So for those of us that are in our 30s or 40s or 50s, what advice do you have as far as just like physically? I mean, you've been on the mat for 52 years in one way, shape, or form, whether it was through a traditional martial art or wrestling or jiu-jitsu or kickboxing or MMA or boxing or whatever. What advice do you have for those of us that want to do this for the rest of our lives, longevity, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so well, I grew up on a farm, so we were working from when you're a kid, so it's so different. So I was used to being in motion and moving and doing stuff. And then later, when I got out of college, it was horrifying thinking I was going to have to sit at a desk for 8 or 10 hours. But what's weird, you sit at a desk, your brain's busy, you don't realize that your body's not doing anything. But I don't think we're made to do that, really. I mean, if you look at the aging studies, they're like Romanians that farm and they walk for a while and sit down, and then they pull a trailer, and then they lift something, and or the Okinawan fishermen and stuff. So anyway, yeah. So one, you got to be moving. You got to do something. Well, it's kind of funny. Stand by your desk. I don't think we were made to stand by a desk. But anyway, but that's the reality. So find something fun to do as a hobby, and then you'll get moving. So.
Yeah, a hobby and sort of a profession. If you can find a profession that keeps you doing at least something physical, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, times change. I think after COVID gives you a little bit more freedom to be in motion. But, yeah, so some kind of motion, something fun to do with fun people. Because part of the movement thing is your brain and the endorphins and the people. And so, got to find something fun. So, this was fun to me. It was fun people, fun to move, fun stuff to do. Actually, when I started doing it full time, I was trying to figure out if we could ruin my hobby. So,
right.
But yeah, so it's always been, a lot of motion and stuff like that. I mean, that's the beauty of growing up on a farm. You're moving and working. It's just that it's hard to make a living.
How did you get into wrestling? Was there like a good wrestling program in your community, or?
No. So I had we had football that started in the 3rd grade.
Okay.
And the football coach said, "Hey, you should go out for wrestling." And so they started a wrestling team. And he was just like the local guy that always liked the kids to be doing sports.
Okay.
And so I think that we do a lot of sports, but we forget the actual value of the sport. And no one talks about what you're actually learning from the sport. Well, everybody's into the sport, but you're not really getting into all the attributes mentally and physically that you get from it. So he had us, so he's like, "Hey, you should go out for wrestling." And so, because I couldn't wait to play football, my older brother played football, and I kept wanting to go out when I was in kindergarten, and they wouldn't let me. And so, by the time I got to 3rd grade, I was so happy. And then he said, "Go out for wrestling," and then we went to wrestling practice. Yeah, my wrestling coaches, the guy never wrestled in his life, so he just running a wrestling practice and not having ever wrestled.
So how did he know like what moves to show or anything?
That not too much.
He had like 2 or 3 moves that he'd show, and you got good at
everybody
those?
would pitch in. There were a couple of guys that were older that had wrestled at the high school that would come help out.
Oh, cool.
And even my high school coach had never wrestled competitively, but he was like a student of the discipline. So back then he would go to clinics, and then eventually some VHS tapes came out, so he'd get a few things from there, but information was limited.
So was it like sort of a community vibe around like, almost kind of like, I guess, when jiu-jitsu first started? It was kind of like, oh, you got to move. Oh, you got to move. Will you show your move? Was it kind of like that?
Oh yeah, yeah. You couldn't. Yeah, it was just getting moves. It was like brutal. So,
Yeah.
and I was looking back. So yeah, so I went to the first practice, and then they had King on the mat. So you had to wrestle everybody in the room, and I beat everyone except for this great big kid that was several years older, and that irritated me. I was so competitive that I was in a rage, and went out to the car. Went out to the car and was in the back seat, kicking the back of the seat because I had lost. And my mom told me, "Hey, if you don't stop throwing that tantrum, we're not coming back." And I didn't care. Later, I finally talked her into letting me go back again. But anyway, but it was, yeah, so it was just something, local community thing, fun to do. And then my brother was 4 years older, and he'd been beating me up for years, so he had prepared me for it. So.
That's awesome. So you hear a lot of like people that are super successful in a sport with that like hating to lose mentality. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. It's really strange. So I don't know if it's totally healthy, but
Yeah, it's probably not, the best way to go about life, but it does make for success in certain arenas.
yeah. So my brother was like 4 years older. Later, when I was older, I called him and said, "Hey, thank you for beating me up all those times. You won 5 national championships for me and some world championships in jiu-jitsu." So. But anyway, yeah, it was a farm. It was rough, so we would just fight all the time, and he prepped me for it. And so I got this, and he would not let me up. So he would just hold me down and go, "You're not getting up. So not trying is not going to help you. So you just will keep trying."
One of those like drip loogies in your face kind of deals.
Yeah, yeah.
So where would y'all like in the barn or in the field or in the house or?
Yeah, we fought everywhere. So we were in the basement fighting one time, and my mom came down, and we were all bloody. And she's like, "I can't believe you two. You need to stop fighting." And we were looking at each other. And then she's like, "I give up. Just tell me whichever one. Come up and get me if you kill the other one." And left. So, and we looked at each other kind of funny, like, "You think that's possible?" And then we started fighting again.
I love it.
Yeah, I think I stabbed him with a pitchfork, stabbed him with a dinner knife.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a little. Yeah, we would get into it.
I love it, man. Growing up on the farm, nothing else to do but fight your older brother.
Yes. Yes. So anyway, it was a good prep for wrestling. So.
And this was Kansas, right?
This was Kansas, yeah.
And back then, what was sort of? I mean, you hear about really good wrestling programs, sort of, in the northern states. Was wrestling starting to get popular, or had it been popular for decades by then, or?
Well, Oklahoma's known for, it's just over the years for wrestling. So for years and years, they had been winning. So I lived about 30 miles north of Oklahoma border.
Okay.
So it had kind of creeped up there. And so, yeah, so wrestling had been big in Oklahoma for years. Lots of Olympians came out of there. And Oklahoma State has this long history going back in the 50s and 60s of wrestling.
And is that about like after World War II, kind of when wrestling started getting going in the U.S. or?
Yeah, well, yeah, at some high level, but it really started taking off.
Yeah, I wonder. I guess when did it become an Olympic sport? Any idea?
Wrestling was one of the first 2 Olympic sports.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, when they were going to cut it a few years ago, it was like, hey, this is like ridiculous. Well, because wrestling's like combat. Now it's fundamental to humanity.
Right.
So.
That is super cool. And then for those of us that don't know a lot about wrestling, there's freestyle and.
Yeah, so in the United States we do collegiate, which is interesting. So you do takedowns for a period, then they put someone on the bottom, then they put somebody on the top. So you have to fight from different positions. That was traditional. Then there's freestyle and Greco-Roman, which is wrestled internationally, which is weird. The United States, there's not collegiate wrestling around the world, so we were always training something that when we got to the world competition, we hadn't been training the correct exact rule set.
Yeah, that's weird.
So I liked freestyle better, wrestled Greco too. And there was sambo wrestling, which was just never took off, was that popular, but I had a coach. I used to go to when I was in when I was in 6th grade, I started going to this junior college and training with the college guys so they could beat me up. And then the assistant coach was doing sambo. And this is crazy because now with jiu-jitsu doing arm bars, and he was like, "Hey, you should do this." I'm like, "No way, I'm not getting my arm broken. I'm not be able to wrestle." But anyway, I should have taken him up on the offer.
So, okay, so freestyle, is that more stand-up oriented and there's less?
Yeah, it's a little bit less controlling. It's more stand-up oriented. You got a little bit of time on the ground to turn somebody, and they stand you back up. So a
But
lot
you
of
don't
takedowns.
you don't start like do the positional
Yeah,
flip.
you're not going to start on the bottom. Yeah.
So
and you got about 15 seconds to turn somebody. If you don't, they'll stand you
they
back
stand
up.
you back up.
Yeah.
And so it's way more takedown oriented than the ground tactics.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the same for Greco-Roman as well.
Well, Greco, yeah, but the Greco you can't touch below the waist, so it's all throws. So lots of high amplitude throws.
Sort of like a no-gi judo.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, cool. And then you liked the freestyle the best?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because you like the takedown aspect of it?
Well, the takedowns, yeah, that was fun. It's a fast game. It's a little, in my opinion, it's a little bit faster game. I like the collegiate because, especially with jiu-jitsu, the control.
Yeah.
But the freestyle was fun because things were moving quicker.
And okay, got it. And that's the one you can do in high school and college?
No.
You can't do any of that?
You can't do freestyle and Greco, yeah. That's just, when you go international, you go in that.
And then what do you think translates best to MMA? Which one of those?
For me, because I think the Greco crossed over the best. The problem with shots are you eat a knee, and if you eat a knee, so in the old days we got motorcycle helmets so that we could, if we ate a knee, we would still not break our face. So we got those, but then we got the cheap motorcycle helmets, and they didn't even work. So then we got the Kevlar, high expensive motorcycle helmets, so we could practice shots and see how many times you got your face caved in with knees. But so the shooting was always a little bit dangerous when you get down in the kneeing range. So the Greco lets you close a little bit easier. Oh, they're all very helpful though. So it's not one's that much better, but just in general, 6 months, if I had to choose. But freestyle's a little more well-rounded, so I can make an argument for that too.
So you hear a lot of wrestling, they talk about building like mental toughness, physical toughness, mental toughness. Does one of those three better than the other, or do you think they're all kind of the same?
They're all the same, yeah.
Okay, cool. And so most of the kids are just they're only learning sort of the first version where they're on the ground, getting out of the pins, that sort of thing.
Well, yeah, you do takedowns, and you work on your top game, work on your bottom game, getting off the bottom.
Okay, cool. And kids in other countries do that as well, or they all just do the?
They're just doing freestyle and Greco. When I my first year on the junior world team, I wrestled Greco, and I think the guy from Hungary that beat me he had never wrestled freestyle even. I think he just wrestled Greco.
No kidding.
Which is really odd for here because it wasn't that big of a deal here.
How did? Sorry, I keep screwing up these names. Collegiate, that's what it's called?
Yeah.
How did that become a thing here and nowhere else?
I have no idea.
Just like the metric system type thing,
yeah,
what?
I guess so. I have no idea.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so you're wrestling when you're 8, and then you're wrestling the junior college kids when you're in junior high. So clearly you had some genetic gift for this sport. What do you make of that?
Well, so in retrospect, which I didn't know, but I was looking back, I think God blesses each of us with a talent, and then if you happen to find it, you won the lottery, right? Because everyone has a God-given talent, in my opinion. And then if you stumble across it, and you get to practice it and enhance it. So I wrestled the first year. The second year I won nationals, which makes no sense at all.
So the second year you wrestle, you win the national championship.
Yeah.
And you knew like 2 moves?
I didn't know. Well, I thought I knew moves, but so we finally got a camera. It didn't have any sound back then, but you could have the camera so you could watch some tape. And yeah, technically I was horrible.
Okay.
But growing up on the farm, you were so strong from working all the time. So you're dragging these 50, 60, 70-pound bales of hay, and you only weigh 70 pounds. So you're working all the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't really realize how much stronger, like me and my couple other buddies that were working like that on the farm were compared to everybody else. So
I can feel that now when I roll with like a blue collar guy that's moving stuff around all day long. It feels way different than a guy that's sitting behind the desk all day.
Yeah. Our bodies are kind of made for that. And so, yeah, so it's just that natural. And then they had a thing, my dad would be like, why are you going to the weight gym? I've got plenty of stuff for you to lift out here. Just go get to work.
Yeah.
but it's what I call functional strength.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And then, yeah, that's pretty solid. Okay. So you're winning national titles your second year, and then you did some international competition as well, right? What was that like?
Yeah, so actually, the second thing was that so my brother was dating the daughter of the high school wrestling coach. So I was picking his brain. I was over at his house. I went with my brother, and I saw a picture in a magazine of a U.S. national team or junior world team. And I was like, "Hey, how do you get on that?" And he's like, "Well, you wrestle year round, and then you go to these qualifying tournaments, and then you can go." So I don't know how old I was. I wasn't too old. So I went. My first year, I hadn't wrestled all year, but I started driving a tractor when I was like, well, I would drive. I would drive the pickup about 15 miles over to the field, and then drive a tractor all day. I started doing that when I was 10. So I was.
This sounds like some real Kansas.
Yeah, so you had a lot of children. We didn't have that many, but the more children you had, the more cheap labor.
The more workers you had.
So that was essential to farm. But so I got off the tractor and went to nationals, and then I was like, oh wow, this is I think I got sixth place or something. I was like, and I hadn't trained for 6 months, 7 months, so I was like, oh wait, I think I can do this. So it was like weird because if your brain sees something and you get the image, then your body, everything about you, your energy, your thoughts, your body kind of work toward it.
So like purpose-driven life sort of thing. By 10, you had that.
Yeah. So, and then, one of my worries with the phone and everything is that people don't sit around and dream about stuff. So you'd be driving a tractor. All you do is sit there and think about stuff. So you just dream about doing that.
So you're just visualizing doing that, or are you visualizing moves?
Yeah, you're just visualizing being on that team, and
Okay.
because you wanted the cool shoes and the uniform, right?
Yeah.
That's as a kid, that's all you could think about. You're not. So a few years later, I'd made the team. Well, the first year I went then to try out. I think the match, I don't know, I missed a match during the tournament. It was like at 12:30 or 1 in the morning, and I'd went home because they said I could go home. Anyway, but you get in the wrestle-offs for the cadet and junior world team. Anyway, and then I was in a match. The guy reached around my neck, stuck his thumb in my throat, and choked me unconscious.
With a thumb in
my throat, in
my
my trachea.
Here in the trachea.
Yeah. And the referee was watching. And I was thinking, he's watching him choke me unconscious.
Does that work with a thumb in the trachea?
It did. I don't know how. I have never tried it.
We might have to drill that one. Yeah.
Except the funny thing was my buddies had that they said that it sounded like there was a rabbit that was getting killed.
Oh, like those dying rabbit calls?
Yeah, because there was no air coming out, just a little bit, and it was this high-pitched noise. So they thought that was hilarious. But I was extremely pissed that the referee watched me get choked out. So I came up swinging, and they sent me home.
DQ, huh?
Yeah. So the next year I went back with a different attitude and was able to win. So
cool. Okay. And so kind of back to, happiness in life, staying in motion, body in motion, stays in motion. Were there periods of your life where you were not able to wrestle, or you were working, or, in school, or that sort of stuff?
Well, yeah. So my dad just said, hey, you can do sports, but you need to go do your best. And if you're not going to, then you can get out here and get to work. So we had the option of trading off work for sports. So I always liked playing sports, so I would do both. So I did. I was, after you got done with your sport, you'd go. But, same thing. People say they don't have time. So usually I would finish school, and then I went to, what was it, football or basketball practice. Then I went to wrestling practice. And then when I was 10, a guy moved to my hometown that did traditional martial arts. And so I started doing that. And so I would get done about 10 o'clock at night, and then I'd go do my homework and then get up and go to school the next day. And that's like I was like 10, 11, 12 years old.
And you loved it?
Yeah, that was great.
Like Mom wasn't saying, get your shoes, come on, let's go. I mean, you were...
Yeah, so I grew up very different. So if you like it's cold, it'd get freezing cold. So my mom would say, take your coat.
Yeah.
But you weren't going to do that. And then my dad would just let you go, and then you would be complaining that it's cold, and he's like, I guess you'll get your head out of your ass and get your coat next time.
Remember to bring your coat.
Yes. I think that was his favorite saying. So I was thinking maybe it was. Yeah.
So okay, but you were living your best life. Like, you loved every second of it. You were the one pulling with the sports drive.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't like you had some parent trying to live out their glory days through you.
No, no. Like it was you. We had a lot of responsibilities, so you were I mean, it's very different. Well, from raising my own kids, it was much harder for me to give them responsibilities than on the farm, because on the farm
there's less to do around the house.
Well, yeah, it's just not like we were working all the time. I mean, when you're driving, you had to, I'm driving over, fixing tractors and doing all this stuff, so you had a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
So it just seemed natural to, if I wanted to do something, to go do it.
To take on the sport, because you learned responsibility at a really young age.
Yeah, so like, I don't know how old I was. You had to back a tractor up to hook onto an implement, right? And I'm on there. Well, I can't reach the clutch and sit on the seat. I'm so small. And so my foot slipped off the clutch and I almost ran over my dad with the tractor. I was probably like 6, 7 years old, 5, I don't know. And then he jerked me off the tractor and was able to behaviorally modify my attitude and told me not to let go of that clutch. I almost killed him. And somehow I magically could hold on to the clutch after that. But anyway, so it's a lot more dangerous than the way I raised my kids. But, you get a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, so there's a trade-off there. There's definitely a risk factor. And if you don't get run over by a tractor, you come out ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that my neighbors accidentally drove over their kid with the mower. I mean, it's just like you got crazy stuff that happens on the farm.
In
right?
the farming community.
Yeah, because it's just way more dangerous. But so you got to be more responsible.
Yeah. So did you know at the time, or like what age were you when you realized like, oh, I had this, I'm different than other people in that I learned responsibility at a young age compared to other people?
Yeah, I didn't get that until I was out of college and working.
So like you're in your 30s or something,
Yeah,
and you're like, oh.
I'm at work. I was working at a hospital, and people were complaining about doing nothing, and I was like, this is weird. So.
Okay, cool. And so, what made you want to get into the hospital world?
Oh, so yeah, so a big jump. When I was the high school coach was really articulate about like mentoring me, and so he's like, hey, if you want to get good at something, I just had the conversation with the kid at the gym last week. He wants to fight, but he doesn't want to make grades at school, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll just tell you what my coach told me. He's like, so you want to be a fighter or a competitor? And yeah. Okay, so you want to be a stupid one or you want to be an intelligent one? And then I was like, I think I'd like to be an intelligent one. He's like, well, then you need to apply yourself mentally just like you apply yourself physically. So he was like, you need to study. So he's like, and if you want to be ahead of everybody else, you need to educate yourself about sports performance. And so go find something. So back then, I think I was like 12. I subscribed to the sports medicine journal. So I was reading these sports medicine journals that were like professional journals when I was like a kid. But I was getting like stuff about VO2 max and all that kind of stuff of how to perform at a higher level. So and then I started kind of figuring out, oh, well, someone's not making me go to school. I actually get to go to school so that I can learn things that I can apply, the things that I really enjoy in life. And so I enjoyed competing athletically. So it was like, yeah, you need to study chemistry and physics and biology and all those things so that you can use it for what you want to do. So that was very helpful for motivating me in school too.
And then you ended up with 2 degrees, right?
Yeah, so my dad, I wanted to do sports psychology because it always intrigued me that like I'm doing an athletic event and So I was reading stuff about sports psychology, and I always like Zig Ziglar, See at the Top, those kind of books. So I was like, oh wow, I think. And my coach was always like, if you're, you know, the question is are you working on yourself physically? Yeah. Okay. How long did you spend working on your mental toughness or your mental? And I was like, oh wow. He's like, if you don't make a conscious effort to do that, it's not going to be there. So I was reading a lot about sports psychology. Back then it was new, and there were only a few sports psychologists in the country. So I was thinking that's what I want to do. And then my dad was like, well, yeah, but there's nobody doing that, and you're going to starve to death. So you need to get a real degree. So I was like, all right. When I went to the university, I went and studied economics and psychology. So I double majored. At the time that neither one of those degrees would give you a job that was very good. But I thought the economics degree was going to be good. It did pay off in the long run, but it wasn't. When I graduated, you need an accounting degree and an engineering degree to get a good job. But
Well, that's still pretty fascinating, though. So most kids today, you go to college, what are you going to major in? I don't know. By their second or third year, maybe they've got it figured out. But so from a young age, you learn the distinction, responsibility, kind of by default from growing up on a farm. You find you're passionate about wrestling and sports in general, and then you have a goal to get better at these both physically and mentally, and then choose a major in college that will help with that sort of life mission purpose.
yeah, so it was. I mean, the idea that because my dad. What's odd is my father, his parents would make him play. So all of his brothers and sisters would win state with musical instruments, and their mom would make them study the music before they could study academics.
Wow.
And he was really PO'd about that because he was struggling in school because he was spending several hours playing the horn, and he was like, "Hey, you need to go get an education so that you have some intelligence." And then my wrestling coach was like, "Yeah, you need to be educated about what you're doing." And I kind of put it together that like, hey, this is not a forced deal going to school. This is like, I can try to get something from this to you. So it's like functional education instead of like forced education.
Yeah. And then so you ended up in the psych hospital. How did you end up there?
So when I went to university, so same thing. I'd read a book. It said if you can get into the best graduate schools, you need to do the following list of items. So I got an honors degree. I went through the honors program at the university also. So I was like, all right, I'm getting the honors, have a good GPA, and then it said if you get published in a professional journal, you can pick your school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to get published. But there's grad students that don't even have publications. So I embarked on that. And then, ironically, I was in a class. Well, it's a tangent story here.
Yeah.
So I'm in this class. The professor, it's one of those weeder classes where the professor is really tough. And, he was very eccentric, and his research was in how your brain processes information. Can it process like a computer in a parallel manner? Is it serial real quickly? And you're trying to set up these studies, how to measure that. Well, anyway, so it was like a foreign language when I first looked at it. So I was trying to do this paper, and I'd stayed up for 4 or 5 days straight trying to write this paper. And every day you hand it in late, you got a letter grade off. So I handed in this paper 2 days late, and I was just finally, okay, well, just take the thing. And then I gave it to him. I got a C on the paper, and then he called me in later and goes, hey, this is a good paper. We want to try to publish it. So, of course, he took first authorship off. The grad student took second, and I was third. But either way, so that was published. Well, meanwhile, I'd worked with the grad students on a research team because I was in the honors program. So I got that abstract published as well. But I was so burnt out so I did a lot of research. We set up a psychophysiology lab, and we were doing all kinds of research.
So you were really interested in like the human brain element of performance, or?
Yeah, so that research was around phobias and how our brain deals with fears and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I got the professor I worked under was great. We would do. I just remember going in his office. There was a lady in there had a phobia for snakes. she was just horrified just looking at the photo. Not that I like snakes real well, but I'm not. Anyway, but I went in there after 7 sessions, and she was like sitting there staring at a snake.
Really?
I went in after 12, and she's got their snake around her neck. I was like, maybe I should be doing this too.
Oh, cool.
But he was really good. So anyway, so we did that research with him. And then I was like, okay, I may do the sports psych thing, but it was still not that many people out there. So I was like, okay, I'll go to grad school.
So did you ever think about a career in sports? Like, because fast forward to today, Elite MMA, 30-something years of coaching and teaching and all that. Was any of that in your brain at all? Or you were just thinking like, okay, in order to make a living, I got to do something?
Well, yeah. So being 60, yeah, things change over time, right?
Right.
And you don't. No one knows at the time. So I told my dad, hey, I want to be a coach. He's like, you're gonna starve to death. Like go get a real job. Go get it. Like.
Okay.
Right. And because the coaches got paid a stipend at my high school, like $3,000 for coaching the whole year, and he's like, you're gonna get paid $3,000 to work the whole year. I mean, he goes, it's great. It's rewarding. You're helping kids. But he's like, you're not going to make that much money at it. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to do that. I'll be a sports psychologist. I'll go get a PhD and be a clinic. And then so I was like, all right, I'll do clinical psychology and I'll start doing sports psychology on the side. And then the one year when we were training for the Junior World Championships, we had during that, you'd go for a camp and train for it. And we had a sports psychologist on that team. So that was what I wanted to do. But I had done so much research in college that I was burnt out on it. So I was like, all right. And I worked I had a scholarship to help out with International Student Services. So I came to Houston to do an internship with the State Department. And we were working on the Fulbright Scholarship Program. And we were working on, USIA did these international dignitaries coming here to try to promote commerce. So I did that and finished up my thesis for the honors degree.
Okay, so you're trying to you're thinking, I love sports, I got to make a living, I want to try to make a living as close to sports as I can.
Yeah, but I broke my neck, so I ended up not wrestling because I love football more than I liked wrestling. And the weird thing is and people don't talk about it too much, but now maybe more, but the odd thing, after I won nationals, the next year I started disliking wrestling because of the pressure. Because once you won, everybody was expecting you to win again and again. So you could just feel the pressure mounting. And that's the other reason I like the sports psych was like, hey, there are people that deal really well with that pressure. Like what's the difference in them and the people who are not dealing well with it, right?
Yeah.
And but again, it's just an education. It's science. There's technique to it. It's amazing. Some people, it's like Tony Robbins says, some people do things really well. What are they doing? Are they doing the same thing everyone else is? Are they doing something different? And if they're doing something different, let's try to figure out what it is. It's something we can do. So same thing. So I really liked football. I was kind of blessed as a running back to be able to get a lot of yards and stuff. But one day at practice, we had a guy, big kid, played pro ball for a while. So I decided to run over him in practice. I did accomplish that. But I broke my neck in the process, and my arm was paralyzed. I had paralysis in my arm for about a year and a half.
So how old were you when that happened?
I was 16.
So 16, you're in high school, and your right arm, left arm?
Left arm.
Your left arm's, by paralysis, you mean like in a sling or dangled?
No, when I went to the car that night, I was like, okay, I was going to put the car in gear and grab the steering wheel with my left arm, and it wouldn't grab the wheel. And so I was like, man, what's wrong with my shoulder? So I thought I dislocated my shoulder, and I was like, man, did I hit someone today and mess my shoulder up? Or
interesting. So it took a while. So like, it wasn't like you had that hit and then it didn't work.
No, it was probably not working. Yeah, but I wasn't noticing it. And
wow.
Then I just went to the car, and then I was like, okay. I mean, literally just to. So I was like, I must have dislocated my shoulder because that thing's not working. I should be able to reach up and grab that wheel.
Yeah.
And then I was sitting there trying to grab the wheel for a while, and then I was like, okay, I've lost my mind. Okay, I've totally lost my mind. My mind is telling my hand to grab the wheel. It won't grab the wheel. something's mentally wrong with me. I've gone crazy. I don't know what's so I'm like, all right, this is really strange. I was like, all right, well, I'll just go home. So I go home, said something to my parents. They were like, oh, you need to go to the doctor. And I was like, all right, I'll go to the doctor at the end of the season. And they're like, no, you need to go to the doctor. I'm like, yeah, I'll go get an appointment at the end of the season. So I'd go back. So I went back, was playing I could, parts of my arm would move some, but I couldn't reach up and grab the steering wheel.
Yeah.
Nothing. And it just started atrophying. It looked like, I don't know if you've seen a milk cow before. By the time I got it back, it looked like all the bones were sticking out. But
so you're still playing football with a...
So I played football with a broken C5 fracture, and my brachial plexus had paralysis. So but every time I'd get hit, it would just put me on the ground and everything's shocking. And then I was like, wow, that really hurts. And then get back up and do it again.
So does any of the coaches, are they like, maybe he's got a broken neck, or did you know the neck was broken, or?
Well, the one coach said, yeah, you need to go to the doctor. But, it was old school days. So, like, if he's playing... And when we made the playoffs that year, then we lost the play. I wasn't in the playoff game. So I guess, yeah, what I got from it was a lot of people making really poor decisions, including me and the people around me. That's you can't. Later, I read about it, like a head and neck injury on a football field. You need to address that. You can't put that off. That's life threatening.
Yeah.
So by the time I went to the doctor, I went in, and he was like, well, I think he called me boy. Oh, boy, I don't know how you walked in here. You can look at this, and the ligaments are torn on the vertebra. You get this fracture. This thing's kind of free-floating around. I don't know how you were hitting people and not just severing the spinal cord or more stuff. And normally I'd put one of those cages on you where we bolt it in your head and your shoulders to stabilize it so it doesn't move, but you've been actually playing with it, and it's already healing back, so I'll just leave you out of the cage.
Wow.
But I had to quit everything, so I quit wrestling and everything for the year and a half.
So that's your sophomore or junior year?
Yeah, that was all through my sophomore and then part of my junior year. But my junior year started coming back. My arm I kept training because I was like, this thing's going to come back. When I get my arm back, I'll just wrestle. I won't play football or anything. And, we were poor, so I was at a tournament in Oklahoma, and Dan Gable was there, and Chesborough from OSU and stuff. And
these guys at the time are still competing, or they're coaching?
No, they're coaching. So
Okay,
they're there looking for athletes. And now I was like, I think I was 14 at the time. So I had a great tournament, hit a really good kid I had him twice. I think I hit a belly-to-belly suplex twice on him. So anyway, and I got outstanding wrestler, and Gable gave me the thing. And
that's cool.
OSU I was talking to Chesborough about me going there and stuff. Anyway, about what it would take to go there, and you can't recruit back then like that. But anyway, we were visiting, and so I was planning on going on a wrestling scholarship somewhere, preferably there. But then when I got injured, I was like, again, which was a good thing I was studying because I got academic scholarships later. But it started working a year and a half later, and I'd been running and lifting weights with my one arm and doing everything I could. I always thought, so, and then it started working, and then I called them and they let me go to nationals again, and I made the junior world team again, and we went to, but we were supposed to, I think the tournament was in Iraq or Iran, and the war was going on, so we just went to the Olympic Training Center and trained that summer. But a few months later, I was doing power cleans, and I re-injured it, and then I got the paralysis in the arm again for another year.
From power cleans?
Well, yeah, the doctor said that your spine looks like a Christmas tree. So you got this trunk, and then you have all these limbs that come out.
Okay.
So I was exploding into a power clean, which was loading all the limbs, and that's axial loading my spine, which I recompressed whatever was wrong with it and did it again.
Boom. So you're how old with the second?
I'm like 17.
17. So you're a senior?
No, I'm junior.
You're a junior.
Yeah, so I'm out my junior year. And then
And that happened at the Olympic Training Center?
no, that I was back at my high school.
You're back at
so,
your high school.
yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So then they were like, "Hey, you're an idiot." The doctor was like, "You're an idiot. You had a second chance and you blew it." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm a confirmed idiot. You blew it. Now it's not going to come back probably, and you just I don't know. I can't believe you've done this." And there were a lot of I ended up seeing 5 specialists to even get 2 of them to agree on what was wrong.
Okay.
I was just kind of, I mean, neurologically things get weird, right? But
Yeah.
anyway, so then I was like, all right, I'm done. There's nothing else. So I did kickboxing in college because I could get hit in the front of the face. I just couldn't actually at the top of my head. So I was like, all right, I'll do something.
So this was good. This was bad.
That's bad, yeah.
Okay. So you trained kickboxing in college with a broken neck. Did your arm work by then?
Arm was working, but there's about 30% less. Like if I could lift 60 pounds with this one, it was at least 30-40% less. I just couldn't get. They did a myelogram where you measure the electroconductivity.
Yeah.
And it was down about 30-40% on that arm. I wasn't getting electricity to it.
Interesting. Okay. And then what was the kickboxing space like? So this is what year? What time frame?
This is in 84, 83, 4, 5, 6.
83, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
So the popular kickboxing movies, I guess the Bruce Lee stuff had been out, right? And you had some Chuck Norris.
Yeah. So you'd read the Bruce Lee movie and go to the garage in their condo at the college and try the 1-inch punch till you get it down, right? And then the kickboxing I was on a team, they were called the Wild Bunch. We had like 33 schools in Oklahoma. Bob Kinney was the head of the association. And so Stuart Nogety and Tim Wilcox, I think. Anyway, they were our coaches, and we were kickboxing. And it was great because it was like all these different schools getting together. Some of them had different styles that they were doing. We'd all test together. We had these giant tests at Central State University where people would get rank and hundreds of people would show up. And you'd have like a mom in there testing. And then you had, I think Norris Williams was in there. He was a number 1 in the world, 170, I think, kickboxing. So anyway, you'd have all these people in there from very different backgrounds and everybody training together, which was really
Okay,
cool.
so that's kind of interesting. So you had all these people from different backgrounds, the soccer mom to the pro fighter, and they're all striking together, and it went well? Like nobody's getting their bell rung too bad? And
Yeah, so, well, that was the cool thing. I mean, yeah, because sometimes the guys that because we're just sparring on hardwood floors or concrete floors. So I was always like, well, when you get knocked out, your head's going to hit the ground harder than the guy just hit you. But anyway, yeah, so we didn't have mats back then, but everybody was sparring, and yeah, it went good. I mean, everybody worked together. It was fun. It was a good group.
And that was pretty common. Even like your traditional martial arts schools didn't really have mats.
Yeah, so, I mean, you could do, and so I think at the
Were
time.
you wearing shoes?
No, you were barefoot. But so I think at the time, PKA was big. So Joe Louis, Chuck Norris, Jeff Smith, what were the brothers' names? Anyway, there were quite a few of those guys. They were all fighting. They were fighting hard. They had to kick above the waist, though. So we were kicking above the waist back then.
Okay, got it. So y'all are kicking above the waist. And then was there a crossover with that in the traditional martial arts, like the karate and the taekwondos as well? Or
Well, yeah, so that group kind of mixed them together. So they were like, hey, this works for fighting. And so you just saw this. Well, that's when you got into the functionality stuff.
Yeah.
Because, you're trying to figure out. The problem with martial arts is you get a lot of make-believe stuff.
Yeah.
And some of you can't train full out. So, have an eye gouge. How well does that work? Well, how many of you, if you haven't done 50 of them, you're speculating, right?
Yeah.
So if you found someone who knew that, so some things you just can't practice live in a normal setting. Now the military and stuff like that, they'll do more of that, but you got this trade-off between safety and trying to make your stuff realistic. So, and that's always been going on, still going on now.
Yeah. Cool. So you got into kickboxing in college, and then finished school, and then what?
So I came to Houston, was doing the internship, then trying to get a job. Back then, you couldn't get a job. I mean, the job market was so horrible. Anyway, and then, not a great story though. So I couldn't get a job. I was getting depressed. So I was like, well, let me go do something for somebody else. Quit thinking about myself. Went to a place. It was called the Escape Center, and was volunteering. So the Escape Center at the time, they were receiving. There was a counseling group for families that had abused their children, and I was so impressed with it because they would counsel the parents, and then the kids were there, and I was just out helping out with the kids. But I think like 89% of the people there, it all came from the court system. They didn't see in the courts again. And they were treating, and they really was getting, you'd have all the parents sitting around a table, and, what you realized was that they were all stressed out from lack of money, lack of resources, kids, difficulty of life. They were stressed out and didn't know how to deal with it. And the most significant one was the counselor asked them to look to the person to the right and give them an authentic compliment, and nobody in the room could do it. And I was like, wow, they're in a bad headspace, right? Well, anyway, so I'd volunteer there. So that helped me.
Helped you what? Get out of the bad funk?
Yeah. So, you could start feeling sorry for yourself because things aren't going well. Well, just get out and help somebody else, right?
Somebody else, you start to see somebody's got it worse, and
they
you
got
start
it
to be
worse,
grateful.
and you got something to, like your contribution, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the problem with taking care of yourself is, I don't know, it's not that big. I think it's way more rewarding to be of service to others.
Yeah.
So that was great. The irony of it is it's that my favorite movie is the Pay It Forward movie where they pay it forward. But like 10, 15 years later, when we needed to build out the school and we had no money, we had a construction guy, and he built out the facility for free for us, which was just incredible. I couldn't believe it. It was so nice of him. And then I was like, that's weird. I counted out how many labor hours his workers were, and it was almost exactly the number of hours I had volunteered at the center.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh well, yeah, this is a God thing. This is how this works. Right?
Yeah, reap what you sow kind of deal.
And so just pay it forward. It'll come back, and quit feeling sorry for yourself and get out there and do something.
Yeah. So you're back in Houston, and then so still interesting. Like you didn't start playing racquetball. I mean, you were still picking combat sports. Like, where do you think that desire came from? Is it still from your brother dripping loogies in your face? I mean, why combat sports over tennis or golf?
Well, I tried the racquetball, but that got boring, and I was so yeah. So then I was complaining a lot and not doing anything. And so my girlfriend, which is later my wife, said, I don't care what you do, just go do something. I'm tired of listening to you. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll go. I was like, man, Houston's huge. It's got to be Thai boxing here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I was going to find some traditional Thai boxing guy here that had won all these championships in Thailand, but instead I find a guy from Iowa that teaches Thai boxing at the boxing gym. So, and he was great, real technical. And it was like you knew when you went in, because I'd been kickboxing quite a while. You knew that he was good. So,
and okay, so this is what year-ish?
This would have been 90-ish,
91.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no YouTube,
no
Barnes and Noble probably, maybe I don't know when they came out. Point being, very limited access to technique and information, and if you wanted to learn from somebody, that somebody had to have learned from somebody else, or had to have gone to Thailand or wherever.
Yeah, it was just getting information was. But from where I came from, with 1,500 people, this was like a mecca of information. So
yeah, that's a good point, right? 1,500, including the chickens.
Yeah.
Okay, so you find a guy that knows, he's got pretty decent Thai boxing, especially for that time.
Yeah.
And you're training there, and that's fun.
Yeah, so we're at a boxing gym. So there was a professional boxing. They had an amateur and professional boxing. And then Tim had rented space out, and so we were doing Muay Thai in there. So I was just going in there and training.
And so I guess to rewind and look at boxing a little bit, boxing was, out of all the combat sports, you had the most access to technical boxers than you did over, I guess, well, wrestling, well, because, I mean, boxing had been popular for a while.
Yeah, so for wrestling, I'd get my technique by making those national teams because
Yeah.
those were good coaches.
Yeah.
And then for this, yeah, Tim had been doing martial arts for years, and then the boxing. Yeah, so the professional boxing. Yeah, well, and that's because there was money in boxing.
Yeah, most big cities have some good boxing gyms.
Yeah, because there was money in it, and money drives innovation. So
Yeah.
it's incentive for people to innovate. I mean, that's the beauty of the United States, is that when you start applying money to something, people start getting innovative.
Yeah.
I was watching a jiu-jitsu guy the other day. I was like, holy mackerel, that is incredible. Like, really technical stuff. I was just like, this is awesome. And I was like, man, he's really spent a lot of time. I was like, well, yeah, he can make some $1 million at a tournament. He's got time to sit in here and break this down. This is really cool.
Yeah. In Houston at the time, I guess you had Foreman and Savannah and guys like that had already been successful. So it was probably decent striking here in Houston in the early 90s.
I mean, Houston's known for having good boxing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you're training with Tim in Muay Thai, and then when does the UFC, do you remember first hearing about UFC?
Yeah, so Tim, I was pretty shy, so I was kind of go to practice, hang out, and train. But I didn't say too much. I didn't say anything about wrestling or anything. So Tim finds out that after a year being there, that I wrestled. He's like, "Oh, dude, I can't believe you wrestled." Like, I've been doing this Shuto stuff. He used to train with Guru Dan Inosanto and Chai Surasu and those guys. So he's like, "Hey, I've got these locks from Shuto. You got to see these." And then he's showing them to me. He goes, "We got to start doing this. You have enough wrestling to control the position, and then we can apply these locks." And I'm like, "Dude, I'm not supposed to be doing this stuff."
Oh, because the neck.
Yeah, the neck. I'm like, yeah.
What kind of locks were they? Do you remember?
Yeah. So with Shuto had these. There was the Japanese that in Japan they were doing like a type of UFC stuff where they were mixing Muay Thai, Judo, some wrestling, some joint locks that they got probably in Sambo.
These are just basic arm bars and
So they'd have like lock flow number 1, lock flow number 2, and then so you got arm bars, neck cranks, spinal cranks, leg locks, all these different locks.
So they had a pretty good understanding of joint
locks.
locks.
So they were fighting in Japan doing that, right? And so there were a couple of different associations going on. And, they had these Shuto gloves, I remember, that were really cool looking, but you couldn't get them, right? Because there's no Amazon. You can't. How are you going to get a pair of Shuto gloves from Japan? You got to know somebody, and we're all poor. So so we're using those Jeet Kune Do massive gloves, or we're trying to figure out what to do, or no gloves. And then and then he's like, "Hey, we should start a class doing this." And I was like, "No, I can't do that. Remember, my neck is messed up. I'm just trying to keep training." And anyway, eventually he talks me into, I go to the neurologist and ask him, and he tells me, "Yeah, you shouldn't be doing this stuff. I'm not supposed to be doing this." So anyway, and then he's like, "Yeah, it's a bad idea." But I was like, "Oh, well, okay, I'll take a chance. I've been defying physics here for a while." So we started a class doing that in addition to the Thai boxing. So we were doing some Shuto and the other thing that had happened was Tim had brought in Guru Dan Inosanto, who is like, a student of Bruce Lee's and stuff. And Guru Dan it was just the common sense. I mean, I was just astonished when we'd do a seminar, because he would be talking about, they're different martial arts, but each art tends to be good in a particular range, but most of them are not good in all the ranges. There's too much to learn. So if you to really be the best knife fighter, you have to spend a lot of time knife fighting, and that doesn't give you time to do the same amount of boxing that a professional boxer does. And then he's just breaking it down. I'm like, oh, wow, well, yeah, that's common sense. What am I thinking? And Guru Dan had a school in California, and he had all these specialist instructors in there. So there were people from around the world that were specialists in Savate or in Kali or Pinjak Salat or whatever it was. And so that kind of got me turned on to martial arts. So Guru Dan goes, okay, he was like, combat is about ranges. And so I'll ask you, okay, so so for combat, what's the longest range? Kicking, punching, sticks, what's
but like aside from like the guns and stuff, or
anything, combat?
Yeah, I would say like the nuke that can.
Yeah, intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Yeah.
If you don't have them, you got a problem, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's true. And then he was like, okay, it cleared to, you're on the ground on the bottom of somebody, right?
Yes.
So he's like, there are all these ranges and there's all this knowledge to be learned, and people focus on these different ranges. And so, but he was like, if you want for self-defense, if there's a range, if you don't have the intercontinental ballistic missiles and the other people do, you've got some problems. Doesn't mean you can't fight them, and he's like, so get a couple of things in each range. And so I kind of adopted. I was like, that's brilliant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would get stuck. That was how I ended up trying to find Thai boxing, is I was trying to figure out how to control that clinch range with the assist to not getting taken down. So I thought it was really pivotal. Made a huge difference for me.
And so Dan Inosanto was one of Bruce Lee's students, and how did he sort of gain popularity? Was this after Bruce Lee had passed away, or?
I don't know. I didn't know that much about it.
Yeah.
I remember I just looked the other day. Saw some pictures training there, and they had that giant heavy bag of Bruce's in there. I was kidding or whatever.
And so you just learned about Dan through Tim.
Yeah.
It was just sort of like he was like, oh, there's this dude, we should do this.
Yeah. And then we were doing the Thai boxing with Master Chai, and then we were.
Is this California guy, Master Chai?
Yeah. Well, he was from Thailand, but he was in California teaching at Guru Dan's. And then we had, and Larry Hartzell was doing some locks. He had wrestled some, so he was special on, and Yuri Nakamura was doing these lock flows, so that was kind of the starting, and then, so we'd been doing that for about 6 months, just training, everybody coming to the gym, and us trying to figure out stuff to do, and then the first UFC came out, and then we saw that, and I was like, oh, wow.
How did you hear about it?
I don't know, probably Tim. I don't know. He was always on to.
He was onto it, huh?
On to stuff.
He was plugged in. So he comes to you and says, "Hey, there's this thing. These guys are going to be fighting in a cage. We should watch it."
Yeah. So we watched it, and then we're like, "Oh, we got to go do that, right?"
Yeah.
And so we started going to seminars into California to see Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
So that was when you first learned about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
That's the classic story of like, I saw the UFC. Saw this skinny Brazilian guy beating up the bigger guys, and you're like, I got to learn more about that.
Yeah, it was just, you were like, wow, that's awesome. And then, and you were, so, and you're, self-defense, you don't get to choose the size of the person or all that stuff. So you're like, oh, this is cool. This is like, they're actually putting this to, and that actually it was so long ago. Dwayne and some of the other guys would drive to Colorado to set up tables and chairs at the UFC for Horion. So they could sit on the front row and watch the fights for free.
Right.
And so I was like, wow, this industry's came a long ways.
Yeah, it's a monster now. And so when you're watching UFC 1, you had wrestled, so you knew about things on the ground. Were you going like, I know what's happening here? Or were you like, what the hell is he doing?
So, no, it was like it's like anything, the more knowledge you have, the more you see.
Yeah.
So in certain areas, I was seeing a lot of stuff. In other areas, you're like, you don't know that you don't know what you're looking at. So, but I'd been boxing and Thai boxing and stick fighting and knife, doing all these different arts, and so you could see the different ranges playing out. But the submission part was at a whole nother level. So you're like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool.
And then that's when you guys are like, okay, we got to go learn that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of wild to think about. I mean, that's a very similar story to what you hear about most people. Like, I saw jiu-jitsu and wanted to go learn jiu-jitsu. But you had decades of combat sports prior to jiu-jitsu. And so then at the time, there's only what, a couple of black belts in the States or what?
Yeah, I mean the ones I knew of were you had Henzo and Kukuk in New York. You had the Machado brothers had opened their own school. All four of them were in a school in Redondo Beach. I think they'd moved out of the garage, and Hickson had his own place, and then Horion and Hoyce had their own place. Joe Marrero was there. Maybe Fabio Santos was in the South, but that was it. I think those were all the schools that I remembered at the time that you could train at.
And so they were California or New York, basically.
Yeah.
And then so you guys would save up and go there.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, we had to go there and train, right? So, and I was working at the psych hospital. I was $7.50 an hour. So I think the first year I worked there, I was logging, I did 100. Would I get 120 hours a week average? I don't know. But so I was trying to save up, and then you'd save up money and fly out there and get a hotel room, and then train jiu-jitsu for a week, and then come back and practice them because you had 10 moves, and so you need to get the 10 moves where you can actually use them.
And you're like journaling at the end of every...
Yeah, they wouldn't let you videotape. Not that we could afford a camera, but they wouldn't let you videotape. Sometimes some people didn't want you taking notes even.
Really?
And then Tim had a buddy that was a brown belt, Mark Lyons.
A brown belt in jiu-jitsu?
In jiu-jitsu. He'd started training with the guys in the garage, or when Horion and Hoyce were in the garage.
And so he lived in California,
he lived in Compton, so we would go
Nice.
to Compton and train in his garage, and there were, there was...
He's an American dude that's a brown belt in 94?
Yeah. And,
wow.
And he was incredible because he was an airplane mechanic.
Okay.
And so he would take the thing about martial arts. It's really artsy, right? And so it was so artsy that. So Mark was like, "Yeah, this is not formatted properly. You can't fly a plane like this. You can't work on a plane like this. This needs to have structure." And so he would structure all the technique out he'd learned, and then we'd go to his garage and train. And there was like Eric Paulson would go there, and we'd go there, and Jason and. Anyway, there were, later that people became famous.
What about like Gene LaBelle? Was he popular back then?
Yeah, Gene was. So we were out there one time. We went to Gene's to train.
He had a judo school?
Well, it was a house up in the mountains north of L.A. So they said, okay, we'll go up there. I think Ken Shamrock was going up there to train, and so we go up there to train with Gene, which is funny. Amazing guy because as a stuntman, right, he can do all. He's a great big guy doing all these wheelies on motorcycles and stuff. But anyway, Gene was older then, but still just incredible, right, credible athlete and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then to train there though, he said, well, the only way you get to train with us is if you let me choke you unconscious. And so I did have that on tape. So. I think after he choked me unconscious standing, I think my head bounced 2 or 3 times off the floor.
You have Gene LaBelle choking you unconscious voluntarily on tape.
On tape, yeah.
That's great.
I think Tim went first, but he didn't hit the deck quite so hard. So I was like, all right, I found it. Anyway.
So what? Looking at that, is that just like an ego thing, like trying to check everybody's ego at the door? Like, yeah, let me choke you out, then you can train here.
I guess. We were just. I don't know. We were just trying to find somebody to teach us, so we were like, all right, well, whatever it takes.
And just for the record, letting people choke you out is probably not a good idea.
That's not a good idea.
Don't try this at home, kids.
Yeah, I was like, I remember looking up thinking, God, really, I don't know, time slows down. I was waking up, I was thinking, that was stupid. Now I'm dead. I'm staring at all these people. They're not talking. They're just staring at me. Anyway, I finally come back to consciousness. Maybe my head bouncing off the floor didn't help, but yeah, I was like, oh yeah, that wasn't a good idea.
So what did y'all train there? Do you remember?
Oh, we were just doing. Gene LaBelle had a lot of locks, but not. His system wasn't as sophisticated as the Brazilian guys, right?
Got it. Yeah, he was coming from a judo stuntman, cool move kind of thing.
Yeah, so he had lots of cool locks, and he could do them.
Yeah,
I mean, his fingers were like cigars. They were. I mean, the guy was huge, and he could pull off these locks. But anyway, so we were trying to get as much as we could. And what's the guy's name? John Donahue. He was an Australian guy. Anyway, he was a black belt with Gene. So, and he had all kinds of cool locks. I think he was a blue belt.
So y'all are just cruising California, training with anybody you heard of that knew some stuff, and writing down stuff, and then coming back and training it here in Houston.
Yeah, and you would it was so hard to get any technique. It took me a year and a half to get a counter to a triangle. I know it's hard to believe. No one's going to believe me, but it was really. We were laughing about it. We would joke, and then and the guy we knew that had a good counter to a triangle wouldn't show it to us. He's like, "No, it took me too long to get this thing. I'm not showing it."
People were very non-helpful back then.
Oh, I mean, it was just it's information, so you're harboring it.
Yeah.
You don't know who you're going to fight. I think because Eric Paulson was there. He goes, Eric Paulson, I got a fight in that, was it the Elite Fighting Championship? I don't know which one it was.
Okay.
He had this long hair. I go, dude, they're going to just grab you by the hair and punch you in the face. And Eric's like, yeah, but I got this stuntman gig and I got to have this hair. I'm like, dude. And then he's like, I'm going to braid it down real tight. And sure enough, the guy threaded his hand through Eric's head and was just punching the crap out of him. Anyway, but yeah, it was just those old days. And, and I always said that, everybody wanted to fight, but the purse didn't cover the deductible at the emergency room was my joke. So
Totally. It sort of reminds me, you remember that country song, I Was Country Before Country Wasn't Cool?
Yeah.
It's like you guys were like MMA and jiu-jitsu before MMA and jiu-jitsu was cool.
And then, and the UFC, 3 fights in the same night. I mean, you just got to, and you're thinking about getting, how are you going to get paid? You got to get through 3 fights without an injury. Anyway, so that was the old school, and then all those different weights. And no one really knew what was going to happen, right?
So the people that were into it were the real psychos. Like, that makes no logical sense to go do that unless you're just a total crazy person.
Well, I thought there were 2 kinds of people going. There were 3 kinds. Yeah, you had some crazy people. Then you have what I consider like overly confident people.
Okay.
You just meet some people, they have a high they'll just do
My
whatever.
stuff works, I can't be beat.
Yeah, just right.
Okay.
And then you had the really analytical people, because to me it was incredible science.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay, wait a second. There's physics to this. There's a whole bunch of, there's mental, physical, and so for me it was always, and it always has been. I don't really consider it a fight. I think that the fighters are the guys with helmets and AR-15s and tanks that are fighting overseas. Those are fights. Those are fighters. Even with the the limited rules, no biting, no eye gouging. It's still not. It's still you're really what I perceived it as. It was an opportunity for us to practice combat, and try to get it as real as we could.
Yeah.
And that, otherwise it becomes a he said, she said, do this, oh, that'll work thing, which gets pretty, I'd got in a guy had an edged weapon when I was in college and had knocked out my friend and was trying to cut me up. And then we had practiced these disarms. Well, they're not, and I was thinking that guy's not supposed to be doing it like that. Right. So anyway, so that's the drawback. You got to, you're trying to get it as real as possible without anybody getting totally maimed. The military's always been, one of my first students, he was a Green Beret, real smart guy, great athlete, caught Jeremy Horn in a leg lock in a minute and a half. And he's a dentist, right? So, but he was a Green Beret before that. He was like, yeah, we were doing qualifications, and we did CPR on 2 20-year-olds, and I realized that we're kind of pushing the envelope on all this stuff because we're about to kill young men just trying to qualify.
Trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, he goes, when you're pumping on some kid's chest, you're like, oh, man, we're taking this a little serious here.
Yeah.
So we got to be careful, but we do need to be as real as possible. So that's just the dilemma, I think.
Yeah. So you guys were like mid-90s MMA. It wasn't even called MMA back then, right? It was more NHB.
Yeah, it was just no. It's called Vale Tudo.
Vale Tudo. Okay.
Which was Portuguese for no rules fighting, and then they no one could figure out what that was, so they started calling it NHB, no holds barred.
Yeah, and I remember the confusion. No holds barred. Does that mean it's a bar fight? Is it barred? Like what? What is this? You know? Yeah. Okay, so you guys were the real pioneers. The guys chopping, on the from the East Coast to the West Coast, hacking up the route to figure all this stuff out back then.
Yeah, and then Blake would get he had he's a dentist, so he could afford a VHS player. So we're by then a couple people are making tapes, so we're just putting tapes beside the edge of the mat and watching it, and then trying to do it.
All right, so UFC 1, you guys are cruising around the country looking for a fight, looking for some moves, and then when did you? So you're training a little bit of jiu-jitsu, and then then did y'all teach a jiu-jitsu class, or you were teaching in an HB class or Vale Tudo class, or like what'd you even call it back then?
Yeah, so we were trying to, I mean, I had a black belt from traditional arts and the kickboxing and stuff, but so we were running this class. I told Tim, how are we going to do the rank? What do we do? Yeah, he goes, it doesn't matter. I was like, oh man, this is weird. So we're just like, all right, it's just a Vale Tudo class, and so we're doing teaching class, and there wasn't any rank or anything like that. Anyway, going to California, and then so I'd trained. One of my best friends trained with Hickson, and he had me go over there and train, and I trained with Horion and Hoyce, and trained with and the Machados. And then when I was at the Machados, I don't know, Higgin goes, hey, they're doing the Pan Ams. You want to come out and do the Pan Am tournament with us? Because I'd wrestled, so it was giving me a leg up, right?
Yeah.
And so I go out for the 94 Pan Ams, and unbeknownst to everybody now, that they don't have a white belt division in tournaments in 1994.
Yeah,
it didn't
it's blue
exist.
belt and up, right?
Yeah, it was just blue belt and up. If you were a white belt, you were like, what do you do? So anyway, I go to the tournament. It was a little weird. I was used to wrestling. Everybody did weigh-ins. It was real formal. I went to the weigh-ins, and some people the Brazilians weren't weighing in, and we were weighing in, and I was like, that's kind of what they must have weighed in earlier, right?
Different rules for the gringos?
I was just, it was like, okay, they must have, I don't know how this works. So anyway, maybe they did weigh in. I don't know, maybe they weighed in somewhere else. I don't know where they weighed in. Anyway, but I get to the mat, and this is a funny story. So I see a guy, you see mean-looking people. I saw a guy going through the tournament. I was like, yeah, that guy looks vicious. I was like, man, I'm glad I'm not fighting him. He was huge. I go out on the mat, and that's the guy I got. And I'm like, geez, he must weigh 240 pounds. I'd cut to 170. So anyway, okay, well, I guess he didn't weigh in or something.
Right.
And then I hit him with a double leg. I was like, holy mackerel. And then took him down. Anyway, I won that match. I go out the next match. The guy's like 6'5", 265, Brazilian guy. Oh, yeah. Oh, and then I said, I'm not a blue belt. I'm just a white belt. I go over to Higgin. I go, hey, dude, I'm not a blue belt. Why? I'm not even supposed to be here. He goes, I just go borrow one from somebody. So I'm over trying to find somebody to loan me their blue belt. So I go out on the mat. But anyway, and then I'm ahead in that match. I get the takedown with about 30 seconds left. Oh no, I know what it was. The guy's so big. I'm like, dude, this can't be real. And so to come to find out, I think John had put me in the heavyweight division instead of my weight. I think it was because we had a better chance of getting team points, but I'm not sure. I never got that. Anyway, so so with 30 seconds, 20 seconds left, the guy just gets hold of my arm with both hands, and anyway, he got me in an arm bar. I was like, yeah, I better tap, which was interesting because when I was wrestling, so remember I got choked unconscious. So the next year when I made the team to go to Sweden, the coach was like, it was just like, okay, injure the guy, get off the mat, right? And I was like, oh, gee. When I went back to my high school and did that, I was like, okay, there's a context for everything. And when, I had this Iranian guy, he just cut both of my eyes open on the wrestling mat. It was like it was a different level, which no one had bothered to explain to me that, right? It's a little more ruthless the higher you get. But anyway, so I'm getting arm barred. Like, man, I haven't been in one of these. Hope he doesn't snap my arm, right? So you don't know how people are going to be. But anyway, we did that. So we did that tournament and stuff. I think I come off the mat, and Hickson goes, hey, you got a second? Yeah. Hey, you should have pulled guard. And I was like, you haven't seen my guard, have you? But anyway, it was nice of him. But anyway, and certainly hadn't seen my lousy guard. But so we did that in '90. So I did that tournament in '94, and so that was kind of the beginning, I guess. And so we were just, and again, trying to get some techniques together. I think we brought Helson in for a seminar. Was that '94? Yeah, I think '94. Helson came in, did a seminar, had like 110 people there.
No way, dude.
It was huge.
How did you get 110 people to even know what jiu-jitsu was in '94?
That UFC, it just went.
It was that
wild.
impactful?
Yeah.
Just in the martial arts community, or
not martial arts?
Random
yeah.
people.
They came from everywhere, right?
But
no,
so
not random
like,
people.
So
they
you
were
had like the
martial
kung
arts.
fu guys and the taekwondo guys, and anybody that had an interest in martial arts
Yeah.
had seen that and wanted to learn that.
Yeah. So Tim had rented out a gymnastics school, and it was packed. I think the next year we had Half Gracie come out do one, but we got like 27 people on that one, so I don't know what that was about. But anyway, I said looking at pictures, training with Half the other day. But anyway, so yeah, you're just trying to get technique and stuff. And Helson, I think gave us. I think I did a private. I got 15 moves off the private. He let us keep notes. I was like so grateful.
That's cool.
Because you just couldn't get any technique back then.
And when did Carlos move to Dallas and start that?
I don't remember now. That was '96, '97. And Carlos moved to Dallas. And we were like, oh, good. We can only drive to Dallas.
Yeah.
Chuck Norris had brought him up there.
Oh, for the Walker, Texas Ranger.
Yeah, the Walker, Texas.
Yeah.
And he had that big warehouse where they were filming the show, and they had all the vehicles and stuff in there, and Mr. Norris had built a little room with a mat that we would go do jiu-jitsu in with Carlos Machado.
So that was cool. So then y'all sort of stopped going to California so much and hit up Dallas once a month or whatever?
Yeah, so just going and training with Carlos, so to try to, again, coming back and drilling everything that we could. And
then y'all randomly met a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt who was here in Houston going to school?
Yeah, so Tim and I don't know how you ran into him. There was a guy, Pedro Roberto. He was going to law school here, and he'd done jiu-jitsu. And so Tim was like, hey, I wonder if you'll teach at the school, and we can do that. And I was like, yeah, I'll cut back. I cut back to just teaching one day a week for the Vale Tudo stuff, and then Pedro was teaching the jiu-jitsu and stuff. So he was with. Actually, they had the school. He was with. Well, those teams split up a lot over the years, so it was Alliance, and I think Pedro was a student under Silvio Bering, and then it's I think it's black belt from Jacare, or no, Flavio. Is it Flavio Almeida? No. Anyway, I don't remember. No, Alvaro Barreto or something. Anyway, those guys. Anyway, he'd been with the team, but they had a big school in Brazil. Like he said, with 450 students, had Fabio Gurgel, Alexandre Paiva, Castelo Branco.
Wow. So it was already pretty dang popular in Brazil.
It was getting more popular, but not that popular, because in '99 we went up to Pedro's wedding. Hi and I did. I think it was. Anyway, we went to the Nationals, and someone from outside of Rio was winning, and Pedro was astonished because jiu-jitsu wasn't that popular even outside of Rio in Brazil, that you would have champions coming from there.
So it wasn't like all of Brazil was doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, just Rio and maybe a few people in Sao Paulo or something.
Yeah, there was getting out, but it was like compared to now, where I just came back from Trinidad, they're on the island training jiu-jitsu, right? So yeah, it just flourished after that.
Wow. Okay. And then at what point in all that do you think your game jumped up the most? Was it when you were traveling? Was it when you were going to Dallas? Was it when you had somebody in the school? Like, when did you start to see you learning more?
I don't know. Which is an interesting thing, which I tell people that. So I grew up not having trained coaches. My first wrestling coach hadn't wrestled. My second one had. The best thing that my second coach ever said, and I still practice this day, is he would be like, my job as a coach to teach you everything I know, and then my next job is to go find the people that know the stuff that you don't know to help you. Mm-hmm. Which is not a typical coach. Like, a lot of them think they have to know everything, whereas I really like the approach with lots of different coaches, different mindsets, different strategies. Of course, some people are better than others, but what I like is the critical thing, which goes to the critical thinking. our school system went to one of these where I'm going to give you the correct information. And I just don't think that education's like that in martial arts or academia, wherever it is. It's you want to teach your child to be critical thinking and to be able to have the knowledge to be able to dissect things and try to determine for themselves so what they believe to be accurate and true.
Interesting. So more of a problem-solving approach than being fed the proper techniques.
Yeah.
You learned more from figuring it out than if someone had just given it all to you.
Yeah. And so what I noticed, which was kind of unusual because, a lot of times you want to go to the best coach and get the best technique, which is great if you have access to that. But I always say there's some kid wrestling in Iowa somewhere in some little town that's getting ready to kick everyone's rear, right? But and the same thing, you're seeing these fighters, they come out of nowhere. But I think they're good, independent problem solvers with this God-given talent, probably a combination of the two. But for children and teaching or even adults, it's just like having them analyze stuff, critically think, and problem solve on the fly is like maybe the best. And so it was, I can't distinguish. I thought that was the key. And then, you would get more information at times than others, but just having that. But really, that's the joy of life, is knowing that you don't know, but that it's really fun figuring out how the planet works. And
that's fascinating. So right now, today, we have a ton of information. Like, I don't know, we've got, 30, 40 black belts here at Elite. We've got every black belt in the world's got videos all over YouTube. A new student can get all that information, but would you say that one of the key pillars of success is that guy just being hungry, locking himself in his basement, or like figuring it out himself?
Yeah, because everyone's different. What's cool is that all humans are different. There's no two same humans. So what works for one and another. So it creates innovation when people are problem solving and critically thinking. And so I think that and then over the years, in reality, but that's kind of like economics or any market. When it first starts, the worst of the worst aren't that bad, and the best of the best aren't that good. And this sport has evolved over the years, and the best people are just incredible. It just went to levels that you never thought of. But also on the flip side, as the bar gets low on the other end, I think it gets lower than it was originally. But that's just, it's hard to hold the quality in. It's just like if you're doing economics or a product, you're always trying to hold that quality and have your innovation and stuff. So same thing with this.
Nice. So you're back, and then when does Elite happen? Elite MMA.
So we were doing, what did we do? So we did 93, we started those NHB Valley Tudo classes. And then in 97 we moved in. When did you start?
That's when I met you guys. 97, y'all were at Keller's, the racquetball court.
And so we were we called it the dungeon because there's an old racquetball court and the walls were padded, and so we were training in there. So that was 97. I don't know, I had a company, I think I'd Focus Self-Defense Academy, because I was always like, whatever you focus on is what you're going to get. And we were doing that, I think it was back then. And then in 99, end of 99, my hospital closed that I was working at, and so I think it's one of the last 3 people there. But and then they closed down, so I was like, well, let me see if I can ruin my hobby and do this full time. And so we moved, and I think we had 35 students and 12 paying students.
Right, right. So what were those guys like back then? Who were they?
So there was, you were there.
Yeah.
You had Hong and.
Yeah. But what type of people? Were they law enforcement? Were they?
No, that's the beauty of the sport. It's like everyone.
Okay.
It's just literally I consider it a huge blessing.
Mm-hmm.
At the hospital, you're going to get people of very similar backgrounds and education and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of mixed martial arts or of jiu-jitsu or whatever it is like you get people from all different walks of life. So, and it was kind of the same thing then. That was it was kind of a rough crowd then.
Yeah.
Because the training was less palatable, I guess.
And you guys didn't know anything. I mean, it was like just a bunch of dudes in a garage beating the hell out of each other.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we were like, you get a technique and you're just so happy. So
Yeah, you were purple and I was blue for my first class.
yeah, and I was horrified teaching as a purple. I was like, oh my God, what? And
Yeah.
then Pedro would be like, look, dude, there's nobody else around. What are you complaining about?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it's still, that doesn't make it right. But anyway, and he's like, any information's better than no information.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, we'll keep going. And in fact, and you didn't even know what. Whoa, that's a funny story. It's like those fights early on were amazing. I was talking to someone the other day. It's one of those crazy people. You said the groups of people.
Yeah.
Well, it was one of the crazy people, right? And he made a comment to me. He goes, do you remember how scary it was fighting back then? And I was like, yeah. Well, it's very different. I mean, the only, you couldn't bite or eye gouge, right? And you weren't wearing gloves, right? But you didn't know what would happen when you squared off with the boxer. So you get a pro boxer in front of you who's been knocking people out, and you're planning on shooting a double leg on them. Well, how many of those have you seen? Well, not too many. Or you're going to shoot a sweep single because you're trying to get off the line and not eat a knee or whatever it is, right? So you just had this healthy fear about, holy mackerel, like we don't know really how this all ends up at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And kind of an adrenaline rush, but it was fun. And so even back then, the Eric Naus and Mark Denny were doing the Dog Brothers, so they were doing like full contact fighting with hockey gloves and fencing masks with sticks, just smacking each other with all kinds of weapons and fighting on the ground. And so it was this thing now. And the other part that's unspoken, I think, about. So now the UFC has quite a few rules, try to keep people safe, and the level is so high, people can get injured. So you want to keep the safety in. But back then you had to submit, or your corner had to, not a referee. Well, that creates a lot of humility, because either you get total brain damage from just continuing to get punched in the face or elbowed in the face or kicked, or you let your ego go and you submit, and you can't complain that the referee stopped it too soon.
What do you like watching more, the fights today or the original first 5 or 10 UFCs?
Well, I love them all, because the early ones you're just looking for different things. The early ones, there were no weight categories, no time limits. People were having their corners having to throw in the towel. They're having to say stop. Referees not intervening. But that has its limitations, and it was archaic. And but there's something to that. And then now it's so scientific. The level of expertise is incredible.
Yeah.
So it's like the telephone with the cord on it and the cell phone, right?
Totally.
But I like them both, but I'm glad to have a cell phone now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I get a little nostalgic. I really like those early ones. I really like the no weight class thing. I love the different styles. I think that was really cool. Now it's like a science experiment. It's crazy technical. It's about weight cutting, what supplements you can get away with, so much more factored into it. So it's very different. And I really love the old school stuff, man. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, and from a self-defense standpoint, it has a lot of merit, right? Because I was working at the psych hospital, right? You'd get called on a code, and I just watched a guy, 220-pound guy. He didn't, he's in seclusion, so he's kicking the door. It's got these 4 locks on it. Well, the door wasn't coming apart, but the entire jam and the door were coming out of the wall. He's kicking so hard. So we were like, he gets out of there, I think we're dead. But we were fighting at the time, and it was so Neanderthal. I was like, well, can't be worse than the mutant that was trying to kill me earlier in the week. But
right.
Anyway, but yeah, so they have this, and I got a lot from it for self-defense, right? Just, if it's your kid or your adult or something like that, just like putting yourself in situations where you have to be able to think and be rational and try to stay calm and be methodical, because if you can't control your emotions during those times, then you're not as articulate, and you don't do. I mean, a few people do better, but most people don't.
Well, cool. I know we got to wrap up soon, but I want to ask you, what was the thought process and the leap of faith you took from quitting your full-time gig to doing Elite full-time? What was that conversation like?
Well, remember I like the sports psych.
Yeah.
And so I considered there's a mental health community which I'm probably not my background is different. And so there's a lot of it I don't agree with, and some really cool stuff in it too. But the thing with it was it never made sense to me at the psych hospital. I always thought I got it. You got to label a disorder, and then you have this disorder, and then that's who you are, and then you take this medicine. And I don't really believe too much in that. I know you got to label it for scientific purposes and try to do that, but in my opinion, humans are operating on this continuum of efficacy and of sanity. So humans are operating on this level of, in my opinion, it's like sports psych. Like you're pitching a no-hitter to, every pitch I throw, they're racking it out of this, so you're trying to get, I mean, I've seen CEOs of Fortune 50 companies in the hospital because they're having problems to they're accomplishing great things. So I like to see people on a continuum, myself included. Sometimes I'm at the lower part. I'd rather no. And so I always saw it as it was a sports psychology was part of that spectrum where you're working on this end. And again, like when Tony Robbins, like, hey, these guys doing something that these people could use. So if I've got teenagers and I take 20 kids that are struggling with their behavior or with depression, and I put them all together, you're perpetuating the problem. It was like the COVID deal. Like, I grew up on a farm with cattle. You don't take the sick cattle and go put them with the healthy ones. So the day that they said, go home to your family, I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. I want to go home and get my family sick. So same thing with so that's ridiculous. That was so stupid. I can't even talk about how stupid that is. Mm-hmm. So you didn't do that with your cattle. If you do that with like animal, farms, you don't do that. You segregate them off, you treat them, get them well, and they get them back. But anyway, so the same thing with the mental health thing. Why am I going to, sometimes you have to, everybody's got to be together, but if I can take a kid that's struggling with school or with whatever's going on with him and put him with 12 ones that are not struggling with that, they'll tend to pull them up. And so the reason I made the leap of faith was I thought that with martial arts, because I really love it, I think it addresses the mind and the body. That was the other thing. I'm going to give them pills. I'm not going to have them exercise. Are you kidding me? My God. Like, we know all the health benefits of exercise and all the endorphins and then neurotropins, all kinds of stuff that are released, and we're not doing it. You're gonna let them set. So it was like a mind-body deal. And the martial arts treats your brain, it treats your body, and if you do it in a healthy manner with healthy people, a high tide raises all the boats. So 15 kids that are doing well, they tend to pull the other kid up. And sometimes with the other, you're pulling the kids backwards, in my opinion, just the mass effect of it. And the same, but whatever's good for kids is good for adults, in my opinion. If you just think about it, if it's good for a kid, well, it's probably good for an adult. And sometimes what the adults are doing is probably not good. But so same thing with the adults. You hang around some people. I mean, as adults, you're not supposed to be having problems or whatever. I don't know whatever. But you get around some positive people that are doing healthy things. They're exercising. They're interacting. So that really, I wanted to do that. I thought it was going to make a bigger difference with my community and with the people around me than it was in the other setting. And I just think it's a great setting for people on a physical and mental and mentally changing, helping people. It was far more effective facility and environment to do that in than in the hospital. Although you got to have hospitals. I'm not saying that's not a good idea, but I just found it was a great venue to do that.
That's pretty cool. So you could reach a ton of people and do it through something that you had been passionate about for decades.
Yeah. And if you think about it, even if you're fighting, if you're not, you're going to ask the guys, had the UFC fighting, famous fighter sitting on my bench and say, hey, how you feeling? We just finished practice. He's like, I'm a little scared. I was like, wow, the guy just said he was scared. And I was like, man, that's really, he's like, yeah, once I get going, I'll be okay. That's just a healthy thing to say. And for the 17-year-old and the 12-year-old and everybody else to be able to relate to that, oh, okay, that's okay. It's what I'm going to do with this fear that really matters. and we've figured out some ways of channeling it so where it's something productive. So yeah.
Well, super cool. Well, let's wrap this up. So Eric Williams, one of the original gangsters of jiu-jitsu in Houston, the first Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt in Houston. If people want to get in touch with you, they can't find you on Instagram, they can't find you on Facebook, you're not on TikTok, but you're at Elite MMA Westheimer all the time, teaching and training, and they can pop in and catch you around.
Not on any social media. Sorry about that. Still have some sanity. No, but I am in the gym all the time.
Well, there's a lot more we want to cover with you. Hopefully, you'll come back from time to time and share more of your wisdom with us.
Okay, thanks. And my apologies if I can't remember names or my memory may be skewed, so
I don't doubt it with all those war stories you just told us. So
okay.
awesome.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.